and we will let people in, and people will start showing up during as well. All right. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
We'll get going here in another minute and let a few people show up. Ian gets the gold star, Ethan gets the gold star for being at the most, I think, of these.
Mm-hmm.
Ian, thanks for joining. Yeah.
I missed a lot of them today, though, because I don't know, because I'm getting burnt out.
Yeah, I know it's a lot.
Well, you and the team, I mean, you guys have to go to all of them somehow, so you're doing better than me.
It's kind of what we have to do. It's good. It's really good information. So just a few more days. Next year, we'll all be together, I hope. So we will be, not even I hope. March 9th, we're going to do this live. So I guess welcome. I guess we can get going. We are recording this session. I do want to thank today's sponsors. The presenting sponsor for the day is Bellmark, and the session sponsors are Hillebrand Beer Supply Chain and Keg Management Specialist and Tri-State Carbonation Services. So I appreciate you all showing up to this. This is a super important topic. Mariquita Reese has stepped forward and said she wanted to talk a little bit and be helpful. She's in Kingston, New York. Has been a professional brewer since 2018, so not even that long, which is great. Formerly at Captain Lawrence and Sloop. Her experience is with high volume production, kettle sours, and workforce development and training. So Mariquita, thank you for doing this. And Ian Conboy with Lucky Hair is also joining us, who has a program of his own. He's going to contribute to the conversation as well. So, so welcome and thanks for being a part of this. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell everybody who might not know who you are about how you got into the brewing industry and a little background.
Sure. So I was working at a tap room in 2017 just as a part-time server while I was putting myself through the early stages of law school. And I very quickly decided that I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to, pay all the money to basically be stressed out for 5 years. So I made a quick pivot and ended up, while I was working at the tasting room, I saw an advertisement for a course basically to get like in the ground floor training for brewing and distilling up at Schenectady Community College. And that was taught by one of the brewers at the place I was working at the time. We were coworkers. So I told him I wanted to do it, and I went through the state workforce development program at Columbia County specifically, and got into the program and took it. And by the end of the year, I was professionally brewing at Captain Lawrence down in Westchester. So that was how I got in. Long time beer drinker, long time fan of craft beverages in general, and a customer of the brewery where I was working at the time. So it just kind of seemed like a good fit. It was like right time, right place, and the willingness and ability to start over again at 30 and get into brewing professionally.
And so, talk a little bit about, I know we're going to get into, your passion or wanting to get into diversifying the industry a little bit more, and some programs that maybe brewers can do on their own to help in that effort. How has the journey been so far? I mean, in terms of like, are you learning a lot at breweries? Are you finding acceptance at breweries?
That's a good question. It's a complicated question, but basically, I'd say at least from my coworkers and like my immediate, day-to-day people, super accepting, super collaborative, willing to listen and learn and get to know me basically. And I don't find I've had much issues with anybody I've worked with in the industry. And this will be almost 4 years soon. So it's a mixed bag. I'd say there's issues that I've had as far as being overlooked or underestimated that I've had to deal with, but that's pretty much my experience as a Black woman in any professional field. You know, that's unfortunately always gonna kind of be a weight that I have to carry, you know, to be the best and be the nicest and, you know, hope that I don't, you know, get targeted for any kind of, you know, exclusionary practices or feeling the need to overperform. You know, that's all part of it. But I'd say it's less so in this industry, in my experience, than in the financial industry, which is where my previous career was.
So talk a little bit about then, I guess, how you got into maybe or what you're doing to help, you know, the inclusivity effort of our industry, which is, you know, sorely behind, which we all know. I mean, you know, just what I started this job in 2013, and it was, you know, still heavily, you know, white men with beards that, you know, either looked homeless or worked in a brewery, you know what I mean? And then, you know, then we got it, and now there's a lot more women, but, you know, still people of color and our inclusivity efforts are still really far behind. So I think, you know, this week we had Dr. J speak a few times. She's been a real point of light for us in the industry together. She's there for us to kind of help educate us on how we can, you know, be more inclusive, especially as the inclusivity and diversity partner for the Brewers Association, the main BA. But on the state level, and Sophia is on this, and she chairs our inclusivity committee. I see Eric, who is on, so, you know, a few members of that committee on there. So we need to do better in New York, and in some parts of New York, we're doing better than other parts of New York, specifically downstate where there's more diverse populations. You know, and still have a long ways to go. It doesn't mean they've solved the problem either, or the issue. But, you know, upstate is a different animal. So talk a little bit about, you know, some of the things you've been involved with and why it's important to you.
Sure. So the upstate, downstate distinction is just so important to the conversation of diversity overall. I mean, it's like that as far as the workforce, it's like that for education. There's less people of color around and a lot more hurdles to jump the further north or west you get within New York State. I took for example, personally, I was living in Catskill at the time. I was driving to Schenectady to go to these classes, which is an hour plus north. Then when I finished the program, I had to drive 2 hours south to Westchester to get my first full-time brewery job. So I'm just me personally, I was spanning 4 hours of the state just to work in the beer industry when I was already working at a brewery and already had a foot in the door. So I think just the geography of the state is a huge hurdle. It's a very big state. There's a lot of people. And if you don't have a car or you don't live in a place where there's public transportation, you're dead in the water, basically. So that's a lot to take into consideration when, you know, trying to be inclusive and maybe start more diverse hiring programs. You have to take geography into effect heavily.
So what have you been involved with then, I guess? You know, what's your experience so far with the program like this or programs?
So when I was at Sloop last summer, there was basically a meeting that I found out through the grapevine that was taking place amongst the higher ups and the salespeople. And it was kind of like, we don't want to ignore the, you know, prevalent racial issues of this nation. We don't want to ignore, you know, the very clear problems that are happening in our country, and but we also don't want to be like hypocrites about it. So like, what do we do from a business standpoint to make it better? And at that point, one of the people who was involved in that meeting came to me, and I'm the only Black woman who was working in the production area at the time, and was also the only Black woman who worked and brewed at Captain Lawrence as well. So basically, it took one of those people coming to me and saying, like, what do you think we should do? How should we go about this? And the idea to do an inclusion internship program was developed at that time. And they chose me to basically be the chairwoman for it and write the curriculum, figure out how to market it, the interview process once we had candidates, all of that was kind of put on me. And I did that with a team of 5. And we had about 4 months, I think, from conception to having a student selected. We did it.
And that was the Open Waters project, right? With Sloop.
Yeah. Yep.
Was it difficult to do? Did you find to put together? Like, what were some of the obstacles? I'm trying to think. I'm trying to imagine brewers watching this right now on video, saying, "Okay, this is great, but like, what are some of the things that advice you can give them, the do's and don'ts?"
That's a great question. So the way that we started the program, the way that I approached it was, I basically broke it down into like a research stage. And that's where I did a lot of Googling and social media stalking and just trying to find other Black women in the industry, which is hard as it is, and trying to find breweries basically where this kind of program had been successfully taken on. And it took weeks. I was just reading as much as I could. The biggest benefit to me in the research stage was the Brewers Association. It's a 5-part learning material on diversity. And I read that, studied it, and I handed it out to the other members of the committee. And I was like, we need to read this. This is how we can do it. And also I made sure to kind of display to the higher ups, like the importance of this as far as from a business standpoint and like a social standpoint. And it was pretty well laid out there, like how do you approach inclusion behind the scenes? How do you make your advertising more inclusive? And how do you then put into practice those concepts? So I'd say starting with research is the most important part, and making sure that you have people on your team who actually want to be there, who want to do the work, who have time to devote to the project. Because you're going to need them down the line, to bounce ideas off of, to help when you're, coming up with advertising. Like there's certain skill sets from the 6 of us that were involved that spoke very well to being able to actually pull this off and pull it off in, a very short amount of time. So it's really just starting with the right people and starting with the right idea, and like making sure why you're doing what you're doing and who you're doing it for. So I'd say that's the best place to start. That's what helped me.
Were you successful in finding a lot of candidates, a lot of people wanting to get into the brewing industry?
Surprisingly, yes. I mean, we did get, a few who were just looking to basically get on our radar because they knew someone who knew someone and wanted to like work at Sloop, who weren't what we were looking for as far as our mission statement was concerned. So that part of it was a little tough to kind of navigate, how to weed out people that are basically taking up space for more diverse applicants. that was a little tough. But we had, I think, within that first quarter, throughout the application process, I think we had over 50 applicants, which for a first-time program with basically at that point, we had been in it for a month and a half, from like conception to launch date. I think it was a month. So yeah, that was pretty exciting to see that people did really want to do this and did care. And we got a lot of great candidates our first go around. And once we kind of got to know people a little bit better, we developed questions so that we could kind of like see why people wanted to do the program, what they wanted to learn. And then I picked the final 10 for us to go into that final stage, which was the interview process.
And I would assume that, you know, having previous brewing experience probably was not at the top of like the requirements, right? Or was it? What were sort of the requirements that you were looking for? Was it just somebody who was passionate about getting in the industry and that sort of thing, willing to learn, not having to be like, I've got experience sort of thing? It's the willingness to learn. Like, what were you looking for in criteria?
That was a very, I don't want to say hotly debated, like we didn't fight over it, but it was something we very much had in mind from one of our first meetings. It was like, who are we looking for? Are we looking for people that only have previous experiences? Are we only looking for women? Are we only looking for Black applicants? You know, we kind of had to suss out like what we thought was best and overall, you know, come to that decision as a group. And then it just became a matter of making sure that we got the right like set of eyes on certain things and really using social media to our advantage to make sure that that people knew that we were doing this, and like subtly, without getting ourselves into trouble, like express who we were looking for, you know. So that was something we had to talk about for a couple meetings while I was in the research stage. It was like, how are we doing this and who do we want ideally? And we kind of came up with, I know it sounds funny, but we kind of all brainstormed and wrote out like, who's your dream candidate? Like, who would you want to work here? Who do you want to teach? What do you think they should learn? And that was my biggest like undertaking as far as the development of the program. And I did do that with the help of the heads of each department within the company. So I came up with a survey and it was like 10 questions. And it was like, who do you want to teach? How do you think you can teach them? What's most important for them to be learning? And how much time do you need to do it, basically? And I started the program from that research stage and from those surveys, from like the packaging team, the brewers, and the cellar people, and came up with the 3-month style of training program. And it was based off of a 6-month program that I had done.
So that's an interesting, there's some questions coming in, but I want to switch over to Ian real quick and his Raise Up program. Let's hear a little bit about that. Ian Conboy, for those that don't know, owns Lucky Hair. He is located in the center of the state, basically in the Finger Lakes region, and has breweries on Seneca Lake and in Ithaca. And you started a program. Talk a little bit about Rise Up and why you started that.
So it's not really our first initiative into either opening channels for discussions when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Prior to the Rise Up can, we've been working with Corning Pride, who also is connected with Ithaca for all the Pride events and all that. And we had some friends that were leading that and realized that we could help be a part of it, help raise some money, bring awareness to what they're doing. And it worked out really well for the both of us. And you know, something that we wanted to continue to do and focus on as part of our business. You know, we have an environmental aspect to Lucky Hair that you know, we like to focus on by using our beer to help clean up the area, being that we're surrounded by a lot of lakes and the national forest right out our back door, but also doing some initiatives like this. So it was a collaboration really with a small market in Trumansburg that wanted to make this beer using as many organic ingredients here in New York State. And the owner came up with the name Rise Up. They've been kind of spawned into, brewers will tell you sometimes you make a beer because of the name. And in this case, we started an entire diversity program based off of a name. And it wasn't something that we were actively considering, but you know, we're always looking for ways to be more inclusive in our community and you know, just being a part of as many different community events and all that we can be a part of, because that's what's important to us. And so, like a lot of the other initiatives that have been going on over the past year through the pandemic, you know, we took money from the sales of those cans to be able to be put towards a paid internship for 10 weeks. Because, you know, the person who we ended up selecting, you know, we also wanted to make sure that they were paid a fair wage for doing their work. And we're going to be gaining also experience too, because yeah, it's an internship and all that. And generally, like the interns that I know of in the past are washing kegs and scrubbing floors and all this, but we actually want to be doing, you'll probably do some of that, but we want to make sure that the intern will learn everything that we possibly can teach them within the 10-week period of our program. So the can really started the whole, got the whole ball rolling. And then it turned into, you know, we were starting a diversity internship program. And because of this, it's caused a little bit of attraction from some other local community colleges that are now going to, that I'll be meeting with here over the next couple of weeks to talk about potential curriculum for students who may want to get into the industry and tying, you know, college credits into it also. Because at Lucky Hair, we try to keep our door as open as possible for everyone, whether it's home brewers or people that are the neighbors in the area that are like, what the hell are you guys doing over there? To people that don't have the opportunity to get into the industry. So, and that's really important for us. So it's kind of similar to the syllabus and program that was already discussed. And, you know, we're going through the whole aspect, basically learning the beginning functions of working in a brewery, you know, safety, that kind of stuff, and building up all the way to after 5 or 6 weeks, hopefully the intern would be not autonomous, but coming in, you know, at 9 or 8 or whatever time, and like, all right, I know I need to do this tank and take care of this and mill this in, so I know what I need to do. And our head brewer, who's on here, Tony, you know, can focus on doing, you know, his work also, but while also being able to help with education and training. So this is our first one. We feel really confident about the way that we'll be able to educate and hopefully the intern will be able to use the knowledge as she goes forward in her career. And it's not, and we didn't select her because she was like, well, I'm starting a brewery right after this. It was rather the information that and knowledge and experience that is going to be gained can help her down the road with some of her initiatives that she wants to do herself back in Africa, which is, you know, talking about doing craft beer in Africa, which was a really interesting concept that, you know, she could take the knowledge from working in our facility to a whole new country and show a whole bunch of other people that don't have that experience or ability to learn. So hopefully this will be a springboard for that. And I hope that we'll see a lot more of these programs pop up over the next year, because it can do a lot of good, not just for one person, but for many. So.
And before I open it up to questions, diversity inclusion takes on a lot of different forms, right? So what's sort of like, I asked Mariquita the same thing, like what sort of quality were you looking for in the person? Was it passion? Was it, obviously the person you selected has got like goals, and I'm sure that played into it, but like, or was it just somebody that was just really interested in the industry? I'm just curious. So think of somebody who's thinking about doing this. Again, you're not looking for somebody who came in with a lot of experience, can just take stuff over.
Right. So it sounds like Mariquita had totally different people than that we had, because in geography, like that's been discussed, we're by Cornell. So we only got 10 applicants, and then there was some other people, which I was impressed that we got 10. I was like, God, just somebody apply, and like, let's hope that this is going to work, because we need to learn too. We can show how to teach CIP all day long, but we need to learn to make sure that we're also offering something that's worthwhile. But Cornell is not too far away, and most of the applicants were PhD students in Cornell finishing up their programs. And it's like, well, why now do you want to do this? Like and it's not the first Cornell person that's actually worked for us that was either finishing their PhD, but for whatever reason, they then want to get into the brewing industry. And a lot of them are with the nutritional science background. They've already got a master's and a bachelor's, and are finishing their PhD, and now coming to work with Lucky Hair. It's so we have a different demographic that applies to or that would be interested in working with us because of location. So we looked for people that were passionate and that were willing to learn, and we were able to figure that out through the Zoom interviews that we did. All of the applications were impressive. You see these resumes and everything they accomplished, and it's like, well, clearly you're going to be the smartest person in a brewery. No offense, Tony, but the people coming in were going to be by far like highly intelligent people. But why? It's more like, why would you want to give that up to then switch and go into the brewing industry? Or what are you going to do with this knowledge and experience afterwards that might help your career if it's nutritional science or whatever it may be, that you don't start your own brewery, but you can take this and run with it doing something else. So that's how we broke down our our selections, and then some people were just already knew, based on home brewing, that they really already had all the tools. And it was more like they wanted to gain home brewing experience, but it's not really practical for a 15-barrel brew house to teach you how to brew in 5 gallons and go backwards that way. So I think passion and a willingness to learn was by far the most important.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And just to add on, one of the main things we were looking for was people who actually wanted a career coming out of the program. We weren't really looking for like people who were like, oh, well, like I homebrew and I just want to like get some more experience, or like people who really just wanted to be there because they love Juice Bomb, and we're just like, oh, cool, yeah, I want to work there. I like that brewery. It's like, no, we want people who want a future in this career and want the skills on a large scale brewery to be able to have a future in the industry from a career standpoint. So that helped us with our screening questions. That helped us weed out quite a few people as well. We were like, why do you want to do this, and what are you going to do with it in the future? And if they were saying like, oh, well, I thought it'd be fun, or like, it's just something I want to do while I'm unemployed, we were like, no.
Yeah, no.
You're taking that spot away from someone like me who had to drive 2 hours to get this experience,
Yeah, and we didn't want to select somebody, like if out of the 10 applicants, there was only one that was like, well, I definitely want to be in the industry after this internship program. But we didn't want to also weigh that too heavy. Now the current intern, if she ends up deciding, changes her mind, and after 10 weeks, she wants to continue with this, or we find out 6 weeks in that she's about it and wants to do it, that's great, because Lucky Hair is going to be looking for an assistant brewer very soon anyway. So but we just didn't want to select based on that. And that was kind of hard too, because it's like, well, it does fit the business needs and it's going to really help us. And, you know, we're not training a second person now. If we bring in a different, another assistant brewer into the brewery, but we can't select that way. I don't think that's right. You know, we want to make sure we feel that we chose the best person to be the first intern. And when I say, I hope that we can continue to do something like this, but it may be a seasonal thing, because in the summertime for us, we just can't. I don't know if we'd be able to devote the amount of time that the intern would require. So we're giving the best experience for them too. So, you know, it's about the whole unit, and our whole team, you know, and our company was fully behind us, every single person, even our bartenders. And we want to make sure that everybody who works with us is, you know, we all kind of stand behind the same ideas, and we practice what we preach, and that's important.
Yeah, I want to open it up to the folks that are on. And Sophia, I don't know if we answered all of your questions, but, you know, yeah, go ahead if we haven't.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what I said.
We talked about
Oh,
curriculum and choosing
yeah.
a candidate. And
I'd love to hear about how you, like, a little bit more of the details about how you structured the program. Both of you, this was directed to Mariquita in the beginning. But like how you decided on what aspects of the job you would focus on and what the responsibilities would be and how that would go.
Sure. So the first step to that was going back through my training materials from the Schenectady County Community College program. And I kind of looked at everything I had learned in that 6-month period and how I learned it, and started, there's the little like syllabus in the front, you know, like a table of contents. And I just took that, I scanned it, and I picked, you know, like 10 things that I was like, as someone, you know, with a few years experience at that point, I was like, this is like vital, you know, you need to know ABC, XYZ. And then I opened it up to the rest of the staff pretty much that would be handling the intern as far as the day-to-day training. And that's when the survey really came into play, because it helped me create a course, basically, you know, what we're going to teach and who was going to teach it and how much time roughly we were going to need to spend on those things. So a little fun fact, when you make, you know, types of surveys and things in the like Google Suite, once people start answering it, it aggregates all the data and gives you like pie charts and all of that stuff, like while you're doing it. So once, I think we had 9 or 10 people take it. So once everyone had their answers in, I just went to the second page and it was like, this is how many people answered, this is the most important thing, you know, and I was able to completely weigh which topics were the most important that way. So having a knowledge of at least the basics of that technology was so helpful, and saved a lot of time for me, you know, doing things by hand or making phone calls, you know, like a more analog approach to it. So I had everything in a Google Suite, everything on, you know, like a spreadsheet where it was like collecting data. I made a spreadsheet while we were taking in applicants to track how they're hearing about us, why they applied, what they wanted to learn. So all of that data was collected throughout the process, and it started from within, asking my coworkers, like, what should they learn? What do you think?
Just a follow-up question, is there also, like, is it just in production, or did you see value in creating a program that would kind of show all the aspects of running a brewery?
Good question. So we early on decided it would just be production at this time. But I wrote the questions for the survey in such a way that it can completely be adapted to front of house down the line if the brewery wants to do so. Like, for example, the way I organized it, if you wanted to take, say, you know, I broke it down between packaging, the cellar, and the brew house itself. If you wanted to take that to the front of house, I had the same questions would apply to the sales team, the kitchen, and the bartenders, basically, or however, you know, whoever from the front of house department wanted to be involved. I wrote it in such a way that it could work for front or back of house. But at this point, it is only focused on the production end of it. So that also helped us weed out people who were like, oh, I want to work on your social media, or, you know, people who were like, I want to work behind the bar. And we were like, no, we want you to learn behind the scenes on the actual like production team, what you're going to be doing. Like, this isn't, we already have a social media director. She's great. So that was helpful as well throughout the process. It's just knowing that if it could be adapted, it would be very easily adapted to front or back of house.
Chloe, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I have a question, but also just thinking out loud here. It would be nice to have a way to collect candidates who are interested, for instance, in other parts. Like, you got basically applicants that were interested in positions that weren't available at the brewery. It would be neat to be able to collect that information so that if other breweries had an opening, like maybe they could fit in there. Because it's really great that you're reaching this new demographic and getting people engaged, and that leads into my next question. I handle the marketing for the association, and one of the biggest things we want to do is, of course, make craft beer more inviting to all, but also reach a new demographic. And I'm just curious, like you said, how did you do that with your campaign for this program? And if you have any advice for us as the association of what we can do.
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to vamp a little bit while I find it in my Google Drive. But this part of the program, this was kind of like phase 2, you know, once we decided who we're teaching and what we're teaching, the next step was like, all right, how do we sell this? How do we make sure the right people see it and that we get, you know, the publicity that we want? So that's where I worked very closely with our content coordinator, our social media director, I like to call her, Megan. She was also on the committee, so she had a sense of like what we were doing, and then could also be the one who was posting on our Instagram and Facebook and sending out, you know, the press release and all that. So that started, like the brainstorming of that was started. Let's see if I can find it. It was one of the 5 parts of that Brewers Association diversity packet. I think it's called Diversifying Your Eyes. And let's see, Diversifying Your Fans, that's what it's called. So it's like a 4-page kind of instruction manual on diversity and inclusion for small and independent breweries, and then the purpose of broader community engagement and how to basically make that a part of your company image, so that you start just diversifying the people who are even looking at your content. And we found that super helpful when it came time to then send out the press release and get in touch with social media, like beer influencers and other people within the craft beverage industry. Like, this was very helpful. So I can send that to you if you don't have it.
Thanks.
Sorry, anybody else?
I saw that Sophia just put up a question, so I didn't want to jump the line, but I did want to ask, you know, similar to the front of house, back of house versus the brewing side, you know, did you get applicants who were interested in sales or in marketing or in other areas of the industry? Because I'll tell you, some of the best interns that we've hired out of the area programs, most of which have collapsed. Like, we're down to Trocaire. We used to have ECC, Erie Community College, Niagara Community College, Trocaire, wasn't there one more? And anyway, Trocair's the only one still around. But we've gotten some great interns. A lot of people want to brew, understandably. Seems like it's a lot of fun. It's not. But I know. It's a lot of cleaning and waiting around, and it's hard on the back. We know. But we've gotten some wonderful interns who are like, no, I want to do sales. I want to be your brand ambassador. I'm an exuberant personality. And like, oftentimes these are also people who are non-traditional in one way or another. So we've got this team of older ladies. They're both named Christine. To be fair, they're white, but they're older ladies. They're not who you'd expect as your brand ambassadors, and they're awesome. And
Oh,
like,
that's so cool.
I mean, they're both named Chris, sorry. Christine has like photos of herself in like Kiss makeup at Kiss concerts back in the 70s. She was like, she's the kind of older lady you'd expect, I guess, right? But like, there's a lot of different areas where you can find diversity too, is another tale to tell here, because age is one that's often overlooked.
That is very true. That is a very good point as well. Yeah, we did not even take age or former professional experience really into consideration when picking people that we wanted to interview. And it was solely based on like the screening questions and like the vibe we got and like what they wanted to do with this like knowledge and experience basically, and how it would benefit us internally, but also the workforce of the Hudson Valley specifically. Yeah, age was very much a factor into that as well, as far as like making sure we weren't just kicking out people because they were in their 50s or whatever. Like that was important. And yeah, that also can be seen on the social media kind of side of it as well. Like just making sure that people feel like they can do it if they, choose to do this. Like I'm just reading it while I talk, but there is just one point in that article that says like, don't make assumptions about the expertise of your fans. And I think that was kind of so crucial for us. We weren't trying to come to a place with it where we're like, we only want this type of person, which is why we left the language kind of open. And I wrote the commercial that we shot in a way that was inclusive in like its language and its presentation. So we didn't want to just show a bunch of like buff white dudes like lifting kegs and being like, hey, you want to work with us? Because honestly, like, no, I wouldn't want to, like it was about the way we presented ourselves and presented the program. That was a huge part of it as well.
Sophia, you had a question for Ian.
Oh, I was just going to comment. Oh, before that, I was also just going to comment, like, I love Ethan's point also. I think it's really important to think about, like, the entire multitude that inclusivity encompasses. Like, it's not just gender, it's not just race, it's not just sexual orientation, it's also things like age, it's things like ability, it's things like education level, it's things like immigration status. Like, I think it's important to think in that whole spectrum also. And when you're creating these programs, to think about how you can, things like faith also, like there are just so many factors, looking at your work staff and also looking at your demographic and where the discrepancies between those two things. And that gap is, I think, where there's room for improvement or opportunity, I guess. Oh, my question for Ian was, what was something that you've learned from your intern that surprised you?
Well, our internship program starts April 1st, so nothing yet. But I can tell you though, because I saw your question and I was thinking about it. Going through the interviewing process and just seeing how a lot of the students that applied are foreign students, but how craft beer kind of brings them together on weekends. They have groups, they have, you know, gatherings that's revolving around either a certain style or whatever it may be. And I thought that was really interesting that all of this is happening and you wouldn't even know that there are these groups and they're drinking Lucky Hair, or they're drinking Community, or they're bringing in all the stuff that they can find that is just an excuse to get together and learn more about craft beer, because potentially where they came from, this wasn't even a thing, and then now they see this and it's like, well, okay, this is a lot of fun, and it's a great excuse to get everybody together. So I learned that there is a lot going on out there, that craft beer actually, we know it brings people together, but even for students and stuff like that, it's not about pounding PBRs until Sunday morning. It's, you know, let's talk about this beer and what do you think? It's like, you know, a book club, but you're drinking, I guess.
Exactly.
Drinking a
Yeah.
book. So yeah, so far. But I imagine that when the internship program starts, we'll learn a lot from her, because she's got a really great background, really interesting person, very smart, and yeah, we look forward to starting.
Yeah, I was thinking about Dr. J's speech yesterday, and about like when, you know, some of the biases that people go through when they're interviewing candidates, and I didn't really think about it. And she listed a whole bunch, and that can be found on our YouTube page as well. I encourage you. It's a pipeline recruitment strategies that we talked about last night, and you know, one of them, and it's true, and I think we're all guilty of it. At least I know I have been in the past. You know, hiring people that believe the things that you believe in, or they're like you, or, you know, that they're going to be the right fit. And, you know, really when you open things up, that, you know, another great aspect of being more diverse and inclusive is that it forces you to not to get out of your zone and let somebody else kind of let you, you know, educate you on things that you might not be thinking about, and expand your world. And so, I mean, there's so many upsides to being more diverse and inclusive on so many levels in this industry, and any industry, but certainly in the craft beer industry, where we're so lagging behind. So I applaud you both, you know, for you know, everyone who's doing this, every brewery that's doing this. I think, Ian, for you, it's, you know, we all know money is tight for breweries, and I don't know how Open Waters was funded, but I think it's brilliant that you actually had a beer to help fund the program. Like that's one way you'd help offset your cost, you know, and you planned for it.
Yeah, and you know, it also helps sell beer because people are interested. We saw it with All Together and Black is Beautiful, and we just did Curtain Up. You know, there's some other ones that we just did do because it wasn't really relevant, I guess, or for Lucky Hair, it didn't really. We want to make sure we're doing stuff that we can also talk about. So we knew that people were already interested in drinking for a good cause, and if they know that they can help by sitting down and having a 4-pack of beer, I mean, most people are going to be okay with doing that. So now that we have the money set aside, and yes, money's tight, we know what we can pay, and we're proud to be able to do that, because I think that's also important too. If you're going to select a candidate that's highly educated, highly motivated, and passionate, and you expect them to do a great job, then they should also be paid that way too. I think that's part of it. If paying a minimum wage for doing it just because that's what an intern gets paid, it doesn't mean you necessarily have to do that. So that's where that's how we're able to do it now, and the canning initiatives that have been happening in the past have really, you know, this showed us that, oh, well, that's how we can generate the money and also make beer and also drink beer and sell beer. So beer.
I have this picture in my office, and the image itself is really bad. It's just like it's a really old fashioned, like white guy, probably from like the 50s or something, like a business guy, but he's holding up a beer and it says, "Beer will change the world." I don't know how, but somehow it will. And I think that that's definitely proving to be true in recent years. And I think it's really neat that breweries are using beer as their voice and as a way to make a real impact in our culture and do things like this, create programs, fun programs that make a real difference.
Yeah, and you don't have to be a big brewery. I mean, a year and a half ago, we were a three barrel system, and now we're just finding our ground at a 15 barrel level. So anybody can do it. It's not, you know, the size of the brew house is not as important as the people that you want to include and help educate and give them the knowledge to do that. And yes, and I agree with you, Chloe, about what you said about the, you know, beer changing the world. And when I have the local priest calling me to be able to get a half keg for a fundraiser that they're doing to raise money, and he's very specific on he wants this certain IPA. It's now that the priests are getting into it, I think that yeah, it's helping everybody out.
It really is part of our community overall. Yeah, I agree. It's a communal experience, and that's from the customer side and also, you know, internally as well. Like, this is supposed to be something that we make and we love and we want to share with people. Like, yes, it's a business, but you know, you take that away and it's still a gathering point for a lot of people. And one of my things that I've noticed as a woman in the industry especially is sometimes you're not even you don't feel a part of it because people don't even think you like beer. Like, let's start there. I cannot tell you how many times as a bartender, a woman would come to the bar, usually with like a partner, a male partner, and they'd say, "Oh, I don't want beer. I don't know what I like. I don't like it. He told me I don't like it." And I'm like, "Well, how do you know?" And like, just getting to be able to reach out to someone and say like, "Oh, what kind of candy do you like? Do you eat meat? Yes or no? What kind of flavors do you like when you drink a cocktail? What's your favorite cocktail?" There's like 5 questions you can ask your customer behind the bar that'll point you to a beer that they'll like guaranteed. I've told so many people, "Oh, well, you think you don't like beer, but you just like this certain style of beer. Here, taste this." And they're like, "Oh my God, I love this. I thought I hated beer." I'm like, "I know, because people tell you that you're not a part of it, but clearly you are." It's just, we need to be better from a customer service standpoint too, as far as like making people feel like they belong there. And that's like, if you make people feel like they belong there, then of course they're going to want to work there, and of course they're going to want to support you. And like, "Oh, look, this woman showed me this beer I like, that I didn't even know that I liked, and I'm going to keep buying it now." Then you just earned yourself another customer. Like, it's one hand, you know, shakes the other. And I feel like that's an important aspect of how breweries should operate overall, but especially ones, you know, who want to lead a more inclusive business practice. It's just like reaching out to people who normally wouldn't even be in a brewery because they don't like beer, or were told for years that they don't like beer.
That seems to go really well with Tony's question, actually.
Yeah, Tony, go ahead. It's a good
Make
question.
a great point, but it goes just right along with what he was going to ask.
Yeah, I mean, you basically kind of said what I was thinking, because I've had bosses in the past just say, "Oh, you shouldn't make that beer because it doesn't pander to a certain demographic, straight white men." And I'm like, and so then I think about, you know, how there's a certain style of beer that is dominating this market right now. And I'm wondering if like that could be problematic because we're just pandering to that dollar or whatever. But
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah.
as a brewer, I've definitely, you know, taken issue with some beers over the years that I've had to make, and I've had to make a lot of. And I'm like, is this all that people like, or is it just what one certain type of person likes and they're just the loudest? So yeah, I've definitely had that internal conflict, like, "Oh, great, we're making this again." Cool. Who's buying this?
Someone must be. Yeah, I think, one of the simple mistakes that we always made, and whenever we did our beer festivals pre-COVID, we would always walk the crowd. I would certainly, just to kind of scope the demographics, who's here, age, diversity, the whole thing. And we were getting a little bit more diverse, but we make the same mistake year after year. And again, we just couldn't get outside of our own box is, why aren't we attracting more diversity? Or, and it's because we would advertise in the same places, like always. Like, that's a simple thing that we could change, reach out to a wider demographic in how we advertise for our festivals. And that's just a simple thing that we just, like, it's so easy. And so once we start doing live events again, that's certainly something we're going to focus on. Just one simple step to be more inclusive.
And it's easy. It is easy, but it's also like you have to be really deliberate with it, because a lot of at least since I've been on, our marketing has been through social media, and social media automatically will target an audience that aligns with your current demographic. So I'm going to be doing a lot of research and working really hard at finding ways to break that.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook is remarkable in that respect, for good, but also for ill. I mean, when you do a sponsored ad, you can tell it to target, zip codes that you wouldn't otherwise, or whatever. Like, you can subvert that too.
Right. Yes. And we've tried that a little bit before the whole pandemic, but yeah, I want to make sure that we have to be really deliberate with getting away from the system of Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, it's really tough to beat those algorithms nowadays. And yeah, that was a few weeks of our, preliminary meetings as well, was like, how do we get this out of like the same 150, to 1,000 people that see our stuff every day? Who are we missing, and why are we missing those people? What websites would maybe like bring it to them? And that's when we decided to go to Pink Boots and post it as a job posting, and Black Enterprise, I think we posted it there as well. And it's just like, we got to find places where craft beer isn't even advertised or talked about or posted as a job. Equity at the table, we posted it there and got a few applicants. So yeah, it's a very deliberate, as Chloe was saying, it's a very deliberate kind of process of like, yeah, we want our fans to see it, of course, but they're already our fans. Who are we missing? Like, and try to find them.
Mariquita and Ian, we're at the end of our hour, and I want to give you guys one final thought for anybody watching this. Just sort of your, a brewery watching this, or anybody watching this, any advice you can give them. This is easy, this is hard. Give some advice about starting a program, since both of you have done it.
I would say the biggest, benefit to me as the chairwoman was, hey everyone, was collaboration and delegation, keeping people on task and playing to their skill sets and working as a team to get it done and get it done on a timeline. That's the best thing you can do internally to get a program like this going.
Ian?
I would say, for us, we just started having the conversation, and I think that's where it starts. Is this, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think that the size of the brewery really matters, but is it something that you and your team are into? Because I think everybody should be involved in some form or fashion, not just the brewery. So find out if that's what you are about and your brewery is about, and can be able to provide what you think is important for including people, whether it's in the brewery or sales or wherever that may be, and then go from there. And then when you have questions about, where to go next, I reached out to people here in the New York State Brewers Association to kind of give me some direction that I know that they've done in the past. And hey, do you have a syllabus? Or hey, how did you start this? Or, because we're all willing to help each other. And I think, that's important. Just ask too, because I know brewers and breweries, people, they're all friendly and want to be as helpful as possible. Especially if they give you some beer back or whatever. That's always nice too.
Well, Mariquita, thank you this was your idea. You reached out and asked if you could do something, and we appreciate that very much. You know,
Thank you.
Ian and the Sloop folks that are on Open Waters and Raise Up and Rise Up, sorry. And then, you know what Garrett Oliver is doing with the Michael Jackson Foundation. You know, things are happening, and for any breweries watching, you know, this is achievable. And you know, we spend too much time talking about things and not actually doing things. And it's time to start doing things. And, you know, Sophia, thank you for chairing the committee, and we appreciate it as well.
Yeah, and look out for some news from the New York City Association too. The New York City.
Oh, that's
Brewery.
right. I'm sorry. Yeah, so exactly right. Yeah, the New York City Guild is doing is amazing stuff as well. So thank you everybody for watching. We appreciate it. Again, I would advise you, if you saw this, go back and watch some of both of Dr. J's presentations. They all kind of go hand in hand. There's a lot of good advice in all of them. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate it. Thank you to our sponsors for sponsoring this week's CBC. Take care,
Thank you.
everybody.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.